שלום לכם. מוזיאוני מדע הם תופעה עולמית מרתקת, שמאפשרת לאנשים ממדינות שונות מגע בלתי אמצעי עם עקרונות מדעיים ותופעות מדעיות, ומזמינה אותם לגעת ולהתנסות. מי שתשוחח איתנו על המחקר והפרקטיקה, ומחקר מבוסס פרקטיקה במוזיאוני מדע, היא העיתונאית, מנגישת המדע וחוקרת, דוקטור לואיזה מסרני מברזיל. וכדי שנוכל לשוחח, אני אעבור עכשיו לאנגלית. Shalom and welcome to Dr. Luisa Massarani, a science journalist, researcher, and a science communicator from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. She is director of the National Institute of Public Communication of Science and Technology at the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, one of the most important biomedical research institutions in Latin America. And she has been studying science museums for many years. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
So, Luisa, what is the experience people get when they visit a science museum or a planetarium?
It actually depends a lot of each science museum or planetarium. We have been studying, we developed a protocol in partnership with the Oregon State University and other institutions in Brazil. And we, in this protocol, this rubric, we actually apply it in more than 25 science museums and exhibitions, science exhibitions around Latin America. And one first result is that it depends a lot of each science museum or science exhibition. That is, each science center or science exhibition allows a different experience from the side of the participants or the visitors.
So let's go back to the studies about the explainers that you mentioned. What is their importance and what are the different approaches to explaining and guiding in a science museum?
Yeah, so we saw that the explainers, they do have a very key role in the science centers, but in both sense. They can, they have to do, everything to do with the experience, but because of them, the experience can be much better or much worse according to the way that they engage with the publics. So, for example, if they really push people to think, to raise questions themselves, etc., it can really make an interesting conversation, including they clearly they have an important role to keep the conversation about science very high, but also deep. But on the other side, we can see also that sometimes are not so good explainers can actually destroy the experience in science center. For example, we used to say to our explainers, you need to raise questions, but sometimes we forget to tell them, raise good questions. So sometimes they raise questions that are more like, I don't know, it's not interesting or not evoke properly a good conversation. So yes, the explainers are very important in the science centers, but we need to train them to keep the conversation in a very interesting and engaging way. But it's also important that the families, the teenagers and the kids can also explore themselves the exhibition, because it's also they can define our own path and to be attracted to things that they want to see and not that the explainer is leading them to see.
So when I'm thinking about the children's voice and what they choose to do, how do you plan and design differently for kids and teenagers? You just mentioned before that teenagers don't tend to come to science museums. So how do you design in order to bring them there?
Yeah, I think that this is a very important question. There is not a specific answer, but in terms of kids, we have a whole project dedicated to 8 years kids. And so there are even some basic things like thinking about the exhibition in a way that's reachable for the kids. Obviously, I'm talking about the cognitive and things that are able to attract kids, but also in terms of where the things are, if they are accessible for the size of the hands of the kids, the size of the kids. So we need to think as a kid to plan their exhibitions for them. So we did a different experience. We use our research to investigate them, and we saw very interesting things about that. For example, we did an exhibition about biodiversity. You know, Brazil is really big in terms of biodiversity. So we did like a game, like a real game in life, in which they play with a game in a computer outside the exhibition per se, and then we built a nano forest for them, a nano jungle for them. So they play in this game, and then they go inside the game, they go inside the jungle, and they play around seeking for some information. And so it's a kind of different way of approaching biodiversity and putting the kids as protagonists of the whole process. And so we saw first that the kids are really engaged in the whole process. This is the good news. We were right in terms of shaping in a way that it was good for them in both physically and mentally and cognitively. That was another good news. But for example, we did a very speedy thing, like you play and you play around, you need to go and look for the information and be engaged in the conversation and go back and go to put the information in the game, which was very good for them to keep the mood of the game, but it was very stressful. So we saw that they were so like energetic to go until the end of each step, that maybe we put too much stress in the process, which is a learning process, right? And but we play around with different strategies. We like a lot to play around with different strategies and approaches to find different ways of engaging the kids.
I see. So, Dr. Luisa Massarani, thank you so much for joining us today. We will meet again to talk about science communication in different countries, especially in the developing world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.